The city never really sleeps, though its inhabitants like to pretend it does. In the quiet hours, when the streets glistened under street lamps slick with rain and the occasional hum of a distant car broke the monotony, secrets floated freely between the cracks of the pavement. It was in these silent hours that the poison pen began its deadly work. No one knew who sent them at first, just that they arrived. Letters with precise, deliberate handwriting, the words laced with insinuation, accusation, and promises that seemed innocent enough to ignore but poisonous enough to unsettle. Marla had been the first recipient, though she wouldn't have admitted it at the time. She had opened the envelope with casual curiosity, expecting a misplaced bill or a social invitation, only to find herself staring at words that pricked at her pride, questioning decisions she hadn't even considered in months. She tucked the letter into her purse, telling herself she was overreacting, but that night, sleep eluded her. The next morning, she found another envelope on her doorstep. The handwriting was different this time, colder, more insistent. Each letter, each note, seemed to track her life with frightening precision, revealing her vulnerabilities, her embarrassments, her quiet failures that no one else had ever known. It spread like a quiet fire, consuming one target after another. There was Peter, whose once stable career had started to crumble after a series of letters implied corruption and betrayal within his office. Friends began to look at him differently. Co-workers whispered when he walked by, and he started to see shadows where there had been none. Then there was Elaine, whose intimate relationships unraveled because of letters that exposed private confessions she had shared in trust. The poison pen knew everything, and it had a way of presenting truths that cut deeper than lies ever could. No one saw the killer. No one suspected anyone. The letters arrived in sealed envelopes, anonymous, always signed with a single flourish, a curving, menacing loop that promised justice through fear. The city buzzed with rumors, and each rumor only fueled the anonymity. People began to wonder who might be next, who might be revealed as a fraud, a cheat, or a thief. Suspicion grew like mold in the corners of conversations, and trust became a fragile, fleeting thing. Detectives tried to follow the trail, but the poison pen was meticulous. There were no fingerprints, no DNA, no digital breadcrumbs to trace. Surveillance cameras showed envelopes delivered by hands that vanished as quickly as the shadows themselves. It was as if the letters were born from the night, riding on whispers and leaving a trail of paranoia in their wake. Each victim became increasingly isolated, unsure of friend or foe, each letter a razor sliding beneath their skin. The killer wasn't motivated by wealth or power. There was no material gain, no grandiose manifesto. Instead, this was a vengeance born of intimate knowledge, of slights long forgotten but never forgiven. The poison pen wielded anonymity like a blade, slicing through reputations, relationships, and confidence, taking its victims apart one carefully constructed accusation at a time. Each letter was a brushstroke in a canvas of revenge, painted in meticulous detail so that no one could look away, no one could escape the truth, or at least the truth as the killer defined it. And then, finally, the city began to talk of patterns. Some letters contained references so specific they must have come from inside the victim's life. Suspicions began to circle in quiet, fearful whispers: a co-worker, a friend, a jilted lover. No one knew, but everyone wondered. The poison pen thrived on this uncertainty, this silent terror that seeped into every corner of life. It was the kind of revenge that left no visible mark, yet left scars deeper than any physical wound. Eventually, some victims began to fight back, confronting neighbors, scanning emails, retracing every contact. But the poison pen was always one step ahead, adapting, shifting identities, maintaining its anonymity. The letters slowed in some neighborhoods, vanished in others, yet the city remained uneasy, a collective wound that refused to heal. And in the silence of a rainy night, somewhere, the poison pen sharpened its metaphorical quill, ink ready, hand steady. The city would sleep uneasily, dreams haunted by invisible threats, because revenge had found its perfect vessel, anonymity, and a pen that spoke louder than any scream. The legend of the poison pen grew. not as a person, but as a force. People whispered about it in hushed tones, warning one another, fearing the inevitable. The killer had vanished, or perhaps had never existed in the way anyone imagined. What remained was the echo of words that could kill without touching a body, the lingering proof that revenge sometimes didn't need a face to be deadly. The city would never forget the poisoned pen, and neither would those who had stared into its letters and seen their lives unravel like carefully stacked dominoes. And somewhere, in the quietest corner of the night, the pen waited. Always waiting. The poisoned pen did not discriminate. It did not care about wealth, status, or morality. Its victims were chosen with precision, and the method of attack was always the same. Intimate knowledge wielded as a weapon, delivered with the quiet elegance of ink on paper. Those who thought themselves untouchable discovered too late that no secret was safe. There was Henry, a prominent lawyer, whose career collapsed after letters exposing long-buried ethical lapses found their way to his colleagues and clients. And Sophia, an artist whose private sketches of lovers and friends were made public, her life transformed into a gallery of shame. The letters thrived on embarrassment, on fear, on the slow erosion of trust. As the months passed, the city became paranoid. People started locking their mailboxes, checking under doors, even avoiding the casual greetings of neighbors. Cafes and offices hummed with anxious whispers about who might be next. Friends questioned friends. Co-workers eyed one another with suspicion. Social media became another battlefield, with anonymous accounts hinting at secrets no one admitted having. Every corner seemed to carry the invisible hand of the poisoned pen. Its presence was everywhere, yet the hand that wrote it remained ghostly and unseen. Detectives pursued leads, following trails of handwriting samples, postmarks, and surveillance footage. They dug into the victims' lives, searching for enemies, ex-lovers, disgruntled employees, anyone who might benefit from the ruin of another. But the poisoned pen anticipated every step. Every clue planted seemed authentic, yet ultimately led to dead ends. It became clear that the killer understood human psychology, not just the habits of their victims. Fear itself was the instrument of revenge. Some victims tried to fight back by responding to the letters, challenging the accusations, or seeking public vindication. But the poisoned pen turned these efforts against them, twisting words into further evidence of guilt or shame. Every response was dissected and returned in a new envelope, each letter more devastating than the last. The poisoned pen had perfected the art of indirect cruelty, of making the victims believe they were unraveling by their own hand, unaware of the manipulation threading through every sentence. Even those who remained untouched felt the tension, the constant uncertainty. Parents worried about what might be revealed about their children. Business partners feared sabotage. Lovers wondered if private confessions would see the light of day. The city itself seemed to shrink under the invisible pressure, as if the poisoned pen's reach extended beyond letters, into the very air people breathed. And somewhere, the writer continued their work. Perhaps a neighbor, perhaps someone entirely unsuspected, perhaps a face in the crowd, smiling innocuously, unnoticed by all. They wrote with meticulous care, crafting sentences that would wound, delight, or terrify, depending on the intended effect. Their motives were simple yet chilling: revenge, justice, or amusement. And as long as the pen remained in their hand, the cycle of fear and disruption would continue. In the end, no arrests were made, no confessions obtained. The poisoned pen vanished as suddenly as it had appeared, leaving behind a city forever altered. The victims, forever changed, carried the invisible scars of words that had cut deeper than steel. The city whispered about the phenomenon for years, telling stories to children and adults alike, warning everyone that anonymity and knowledge were a dangerous combination. Yet in the darkest hours, when the wind rattled windows and the rain traced rivers down streetlights, some would still find letters, folded neatly and signed, waiting. The pen had not stopped, only paused, leaving the city with the haunting lesson that revenge, once perfected, could survive invisibly, silently, and forever. The city adapted to the poison pen as if it were a new, malevolent weather pattern, something invisible, yet unmistakably felt. Offices installed cameras by the mailroom, neighborhoods posted signs warning of suspicious activity, and families scrutinized their mail like precious treasures. But none of it mattered. The killer had learned to blend, to vanish, to make each letter arrive without a trace of the person behind it. Sometimes the envelopes were typed. Sometimes they bore the flowing hand of a practiced writer. Each variation was calculated to maximize anxiety, to unsettle the mind and twist reality into a landscape of suspicion. One woman, Mara, became obsessed. She had received 3 letters in a single week, each revealing details about moments in her life she had shared with no one. At first, she tried to ignore them, tossing them into the fire. But the pen persisted. Soon, she began to doubt herself. Was she forgetting things? Had she really done what the letters claimed? The anxiety gnawed at her, turning small mistakes into monumental disasters in her mind. She stopped answering calls, canceled meetings, avoided leaving her apartment. By the time she realized she was trapped by fear, it was too late. The poison pen had already won. Henry, the lawyer, found himself in court one morning, letters in hand, the words of an anonymous tormentor printed in black ink and presented as evidence. The accusations were carefully phrased, insinuations disguised as fact. Witnesses whispered, jurors exchanged glances, and the courtroom seemed to close in around him. The poison pen had turned his life into a theater of accusation, orchestrating chaos from behind a veil of anonymity. Every attempt to explain, to refute, to seek protection was twisted by new letters arriving the next day, each one more personal, more damning, more intimate than the last. The killer had learned the rhythm of lives, the subtle patterns of behavior that made each person uniquely vulnerable. Friends became enemies, lovers doubted each other, co-workers feared their own shadows. No one was immune. And the most terrifying part was that the letters never overtly threatened. They simply reminded, implied, and suggested, letting the mind fill in the horrors. It was revenge rendered as psychological art, a surgical strike without blood, without sound, without trace. Even as detectives examined leads, suspects, and alibis, the killer remained uncatchable. They were always one step ahead, anticipating questions, planting subtle misdirections, erasing digital footprints, and exploiting human psychology with uncanny precision. Some speculated about the killer's identity. A former employee wronged, a scorned lover, someone brilliant but twisted, but no one could prove anything. The poison pen was everywhere and nowhere, a ghost in the ink. By the time the city's fear reached a fever pitch, some victims had begun to rebuild their lives cautiously, others had disappeared entirely, leaving homes and jobs behind. Yet, even years later, whispers persisted. Letters would arrive sporadically and signed, sometimes decades later, reminding the recipients that the pen never truly slept. It was not about the destruction alone. It was about control, the way words could shape reality, manipulate perception, and exact a vengeance that could outlast the flesh. And somewhere, in a quiet room far from the city's watchful eyes, the pen continued its work. Each letter was drafted with care, proofread for maximum effect, and sent into the world like a whispered curse. The killer had become an unseen force, a shadow of fear and revenge, an immortal presence in the minds of the city's people. Every envelope that slid under a door, every neatly folded sheet of paper was a reminder that anonymity was a weapon, knowledge was ammunition, and revenge could be perfectly executed without leaving a single fingerprint. The legend of the poison pen endured because it transcended its victims. It was no longer just a person. It had become a phenomenon, a story whispered in hushed tones, a cautionary tale about the power of words and the unseen cruelty that can hide behind civility. People learned to fear the letters, the envelopes, and even the mundane, for they knew that revenge, once perfected, could strike anywhere, anytime, and from nowhere. And in the quiet of the night, when the city slept uneasily beneath the glow of streetlights, somewhere, The pen moved again, the ink flowing like venom, tracing out new lives to unsettle, new minds to manipulate. The city had survived the first wave, but it would never truly be free from the poison pen, nor from the memory that words, when wielded with purpose and malice, could be deadlier than any weapon.